The roar of a revving engine. The clang of a wrench striking steel. A Texas man with a wild glint in his eyes and a passion that could only be described as combustible. Richard Rawlings wasn't just a character, he was a brand. For nearly a decade, viewers across the globe tuned in to watch Fast and Loud, a high-octane reality show that followed Rawlings and his Gas Monkey Garage crew as they hunted down rusted-out vintage vehicles and restored them to high-performance glory. At the center of it all stood Rawlings, loud, unapologetic, driven, and for many, the very embodiment of the American dream on wheels. But behind the cameras, the fame, and the gas-powered glamour, something else was brewing. The kind of story that no camera crew ever captured. A story of heartbreak, betrayal, burnout, and battles with health, business demons, and personal identity. When Fast and Loud quietly ended in 2020, there was no dramatic finale, no grand farewell, and no explanation that satisfied fans who had followed Rawlings through engine fire and fame. What really happened? This video pulls back the curtain on Richard Rawlings, the man, the myth, the machine, and reveals the raw truth behind his sudden fall from the spotlight. For many fans, he was an icon. For others, he was a divisive figure who blurred the lines between showmanship and substance. But everyone can agree on one thing: Rawlings had something. Charisma, passion, and grit like few others in the automotive entertainment world. This is a journey through the rise, the crash, and the aftershocks of a man who gave everything to build something unforgettable, and paid the price for it. We'll explore the toll that fame took on his mental and physical health, his relationships, and his spirit. We'll examine the real reasons behind the end of Fast and Loud, the exit of his closest allies, and the silence that followed. Before the cameras, the showbiz contracts, and the Gas Monkey empire, Richard Ray Rawlings was just a boy growing up in Fort Worth, Texas, long before the spotlight found him. Born on March 30, 1969, Richard was raised in a modest working-class family where nothing came easy, but everything was earned. His father, Ray Rawlings, played a key role in shaping young Richard's lifelong love affair with automobiles. The two would spend weekends attending auto shows, working on old cars, and bonding over the rumble of a well-tuned engine. It wasn't just a hobby, it was a spark. Richard's early years were defined by grit and hustle. While other kids were playing video games, Richard was already under the hood, covered in grease. By the time he was 14, he'd bought his first car, a green '74 Mercury Comet, using money he'd earned mowing lawns and delivering newspapers. Most teens dreamt of driving, Richard dreamt of rebuilding, modifying, and selling. But life was anything but smooth. Fort Worth in the late 70s and early 80s was tough. His parents eventually divorced, leaving emotional scars that Richard would carry for years. He bounced between jobs as a teen, scraping by as he pursued his growing obsession with vehicles. College wasn't in the cards. Richard was too restless for lectures and too drawn to the open road. He needed speed, independence, and most of all, the chance to build something of his own. He tried his hand at everything to make ends meet. Firefighter, paramedic, even a stint as a police officer, all while flipping cars on the side. These weren't glamorous jobs, they were survival jobs. But each one taught him something crucial: discipline, risk, timing, and how to stay calm when things went sideways. And that experience would prove essential in the high-stakes business world he was about to enter. By the late 90s, Richard had started a successful printing and advertising company called Lincoln Press. It wasn't sexy, but it was profitable. Still, cars remained his obsession. In 2002, at the age of 33, he sold Lincoln Press and did something many would consider reckless. He poured everything he had into launching a custom car shop called Gas Monkey Garage. At the time, the custom car world was crowded and highly competitive. It was dominated by old-school mechanics and underground tuners. But Richard had a different vision. He wanted to take the classic hot rod culture and inject it with energy, attitude, and mainstream appeal. He wanted it to be fast-paced, bold, and unapologetically loud. Gas Monkey Garage wasn't just a workspace, it was a showpiece. From day one, Richard focused not only on quality work but also on branding. The logo, the name, the merch, it all screamed raw edge and high-octane ambition. But it was a risky move. He drained his savings, mortgaged his future, and for a while, had to sell everything just to keep the doors open. Enter fate, or rather, television. In the early 2010s, cable networks were diving deep into niche reality programming. From pawn shops to fishing boats, viewers craved real people doing real things. Richard saw the opportunity. With his charisma, swagger, and larger-than-life personality, he pitched the idea of a car-flipping show featuring Gas Monkey Garage. A crew of fast-talking, fast-working mechanics bringing old vehicles back to life with tight deadlines, wild banter, and creative builds. Discovery Channel bit. In June 2012, Fast and Loud premiered. The concept was simple but addictive: Richard and his team, including master mechanic Aaron Kaufman, traveled the country buying beat-up classic cars, transforming them into showstoppers, and flipping them for profit. What made the show different was its mix of gearhead culture and entertainment. It wasn't just about the cars, it was about the personalities, the pressure, and the process. Richard instantly became a star. His loud voice, flashy style, and business acumen made him stand out. He played the role of the wheeler dealer, the guy who negotiated hard, cracked jokes, and pushed everyone to meet impossible deadlines. Fans loved him or hated him, but no one could ignore him. Aaron Kaufman, with his long beard and calm demeanor, was the perfect foil. The show's dynamic worked like magic, and Fast and Loud quickly became one of Discovery's top-rated programs. It ran for 16 seasons, aired in over 200 countries, and turned Gas Monkey Garage into a globally recognized brand. But with success came pressure. Richard was no longer just a car guy, he was the CEO of a media empire. The shop grew, the merchandising exploded, and business ventures multiplied. He opened Gas Monkey Bar and Grill locations, signed licensing deals, and started Gas Monkey Energy. What began as a small garage in Texas had become a massive enterprise. Still, behind the scenes, the cracks were starting to show. The workload was relentless. The demands of filming, managing a brand, overseeing employees, and maintaining a public image began to wear on him. But he didn't slow down. Not yet. Richard had climbed the mountain. He had turned his childhood passion into a business, a TV show, and a multi-million-dollar empire. But the higher he climbed, the harder the fall would be. And as the cameras kept rolling, few noticed the storm that was brewing just off-screen. By the early 2010s, reality television was going through a transformation. Audiences were no longer satisfied with scripted sitcoms or overly polished dramas. They craved authenticity, real people, real skills, real struggles. The success of shows like American Chopper, Pawn Stars, and Deadliest Catch proved that viewers had an appetite for niche professions, especially those involving grit and personality. Into this growing trend came Richard Rawlings, a man who had both. The story of Fast and Loud began not in a boardroom but inside a dirty Texas garage. Gas Monkey Garage had been operating for several years by the time Rawlings got serious about pitching a show. He knew that he and his team had something different. They weren't just skilled at building cars, they had charisma, drama, and urgency. What they did felt real because it was. The builds were stressful. The deals were risky. The timeline was always a challenge. That chaos, Richard believed, could become great television. Richard took a chance. He filmed a demo reel, highlighting the daily grind inside Gas Monkey, haggling over rusted-out muscle cars, racing against time to complete restorations, and flipping them for profit, often under pressure. He packaged it with his signature energy, complete with a snappy monologue and that brash, cowboy confidence. When Discovery Channel saw the reel, they saw potential. Not just in the concept, but in Richard himself. He had the kind of presence that jumped off the screen. Fast-talking, full of hustle and unfiltered. They greenlit the show. In June 2012, Fast and Loud premiered. It wasn't just a car show, it was a roller coaster ride through the world of automotive restoration and high-stakes entrepreneurship. And at the center of it was Richard Rawlings and his right-hand man, Aaron Kaufman, the master fabricator with a long beard, quiet intelligence, and artistic touch. The chemistry between Richard and Aaron was undeniable. They were complete opposites. Richard was business first, a big-picture thinker focused on making money and hitting deadlines. Aaron, on the other hand, was a purist. He cared deeply about the craftsmanship, the artistic value of the builds, and often found Richard's shortcuts frustrating. That push-pull created compelling television. The arguments, the pressure, the last-minute saves, it was all real. And it resonated with fans. Each episode followed a tried-and-true formula. Richard would find an old, neglected car, sometimes in a barn, sometimes at an auction. He'd negotiate a price, haul it back to Gas Monkey Garage, and challenge the team to turn it into a stunning high-performance machine within a tight budget and an even tighter schedule. The show featured real deadlines, hard decisions, and the very real possibility of losing money if a flip went bad. Viewers loved it. The adrenaline-fueled style, the quick edits, the rock-and-roll soundtrack, and the high-stakes drama gave Fast and Loud an edge. It wasn't just about engines and exhausts, it was about business risks, personality clashes, and the relentless pursuit of success. Behind the scenes, Richard worked just as hard off-camera as he did on. While filming grueling 12 to 14-hour days, he was also running the actual Gas Monkey Garage, developing merchandise, handling brand licensing, and overseeing marketing strategies. The show's popularity quickly turned the Gas Monkey name into a household brand. Fans from around the world visited the garage, bought the shirts, drank the energy drinks, and followed every new episode like a cult series. As the show exploded, Rawlings capitalized on its momentum. He opened the Gas Monkey Bar and Grill in Dallas, a sprawling venue that featured live music, food, and of course cars. He launched Gas Monkey Energy, an energy drink company that played off his high-speed lifestyle. The Gas Monkey logo, featuring the snarling monkey with its tongue hanging out, became iconic. But success came at a cost. The pressure to constantly top themselves each episode became overwhelming. Deadlines got shorter. Projects got bigger. The builds became more complicated. And the relationship between Richard and Aaron began to fray. Richard wanted scale and profit. Aaron wanted time and quality. Their differences, once charming on camera, were now causing serious friction behind the scenes. By the 5th season, signs of strain were showing. Aaron was growing increasingly disillusioned. He often clashed with Richard over creative decisions. Richard, focused on expanding the Gas Monkey empire, had little time for compromise. Eventually, the tension reached a boiling point. In 2017, Aaron Kaufman shocked fans when he announced he was leaving Fast and Loud. He gave few details, but in interviews later admitted that the pace of the show, the lack of creative freedom, and the never-ending deadlines had pushed him to his limit. For many fans, Aaron's departure marked a turning point. Fast and Loud without Kaufman felt incomplete. Richard, to his credit, pushed forward. He brought in new talent, expanded the shop, and kept the show going. But things weren't the same. Viewership began to decline. Fans missed the old dynamic, the authentic camaraderie, and the magic of that early team. Still, Fast and Loud ran strong for years after Kaufman's exit, reaching a total of 16 seasons before ending in 2020. Throughout its run, the show redefined automotive TV. It inspired a generation of gearheads, brought classic car culture into living rooms across the globe, and turned Gas Monkey into a global brand. Yet as the cameras zoomed in on builds and burnout contests, they never captured the slow unraveling happening behind the scenes. The immense pressure of maintaining the empire was wearing down Richard Rawlings. The show that built his brand was now taking a toll on his health, relationships, and sense of self. And though the show was a hit, the man at its center was reaching a breaking point. For most people, fame is a dream. For Richard Rawlings, it came with the screeching sound of tires, the click of cameras, and the weight of expectations heavier than any muscle car he'd ever restored. With Fast and Loud airing in over 200 countries, Rawlings was no longer just a businessman, he was a celebrity. His face was on billboards, in magazines, on t-shirts, and on the front of an empire growing at breakneck speed. At first, he thrived on the attention. He loved being the fast-talking Texan with a flair for big deals and even bigger builds. He smiled for every fan photo. He shook every hand at every car show. He promoted Gas Monkey Energy like his life depended on it. But as the seasons rolled on, the reality behind the fame started to crack the polished exterior. The biggest issue? Time. Richard was stretched thin, filming the show, managing Gas Monkey Garage, launching new business ventures, marketing his brand globally, opening Gas Monkey Bar and Grills, attending events, and staying active on social media. His days began at dawn and ended well past midnight, often without a single moment to breathe. It wasn't sustainable. Every episode of Fast and Loud had to deliver. Higher stakes, flashier cars, more drama. That meant longer hours in the shop, tighter filming schedules, and less room for error. The pressure was relentless. The stress was real. Behind the scenes, crew members reported sleepless nights, rushed builds, and burnout that affected everyone, from the mechanics to Richard himself. Richard, known for his upbeat energy and relentless drive, began to show signs of fatigue. His once fiery enthusiasm was sometimes replaced with irritation or silence on set. He started skipping events he once loved attending. On camera, he kept the performance going. Off camera, he was crumbling under the weight of it all. The fame that had given him so much was now demanding too much in return. There was also the constant need to maintain a public image. Richard was always on. Whether he was in front of fans, clients, or network executives, he had to be the same smooth-talking, confident Gas Monkey frontman. But behind closed doors, that role became increasingly exhausting to play. He could no longer simply be Richard, the car guy from Fort Worth. He had become Richard Rawlings, the brand. And that identity was starting to suffocate him. One of the most telling signs of this pressure was his growing distance from close team members. As business took precedence, Richard spent less time on the floor of the garage and more time in meetings, calls, and travel. His connection with the crew thinned. Some felt he had lost touch with the heart of the garage. This tension grew even more visible after Aaron Kaufman's departure in 2017. Richard kept things moving, but many longtime fans and employees noticed a change, not just in the show, but in Richard himself. Fame also brought scrutiny. Every move he made was dissected online. Critics accused him of being more interested in fame and money than the cars themselves. Others questioned the authenticity of the show. Rumors of staged scenes, scripted arguments, and exaggerated timelines began circulating. Rawlings, known for his fiery comebacks, often clapped back at haters. But deep down, the constant criticism wore on him. And there were the personal sacrifices. Richard's relationship with his wife, Suzanne, began to strain under the pressure. The couple, who had remarried in 2015 after a previous divorce, were struggling to maintain their marriage while Richard traveled non-stop. They saw less and less of each other. The demands of the show, the businesses, and the brand left little room for real connection. In 2019, they divorced again, this time for good. Richard rarely spoke publicly about the emotional toll. But friends close to him reported that the split hit him hard. Despite the flashy lifestyle and loud personality, Richard had always valued loyalty and connection. Losing his marriage for the second time was a devastating blow. It was yet another casualty of the fame he had worked so hard to achieve. And then came the breakdowns, mental, emotional, and eventually physical. Richard began experiencing health issues. While never officially disclosed in detail, he admitted in interviews that the lifestyle had taken a toll. Years of high stress, poor sleep, and constant travel were catching up to him. He hinted at exhaustion, anxiety, and moments where he felt completely overwhelmed. He was, by all accounts, burning out. But still, he kept going. Why? Because walking away felt like failure. The entire Gas Monkey brand was tied to his face, his voice, and his presence. If he stopped, the empire could crumble. So he smiled through the pain, made jokes when the cameras rolled, and pushed his team harder to keep the show alive. Yet, behind the scenes, the pressure cooker was about to explode. By 2019, whispers of problems within the Gas Monkey empire were growing louder. Legal issues, financial strain, staff turnover. Things weren't as smooth as they appeared on screen. Richard was holding everything together, but just barely. And soon, even the roar of engines wouldn't be loud enough to drown out the sound of collapse. Fame had made Richard Rawlings a household name. But it had also cost him dearly: his peace, his privacy, his marriage, and possibly his health. As Fast and Loud soared in popularity, Gas Monkey Garage became more than a car shop. It was a brand, a symbol, a phenomenon. Merchandise flew off the shelves. Fans visited the garage in droves. But beneath the success was a turbulent business foundation slowly cracking. Richard Rawlings, always a sharp entrepreneur, was juggling too much: TV production, expanding ventures, and a growing team of mechanics, marketers, and business partners. The garage, once a close-knit team of car lovers, began to feel more like a corporate machine. The departure of Aaron Kaufman in 2017 hit hard. Kaufman had been not only a fan favorite but also the technical backbone of the garage. Rumors swirled: Richard was too controlling, too focused on profits, or didn't give Aaron creative freedom. While both stayed relatively diplomatic publicly, it was clear their working relationship had frayed. Internal issues deepened. Longtime employees like K.C. Matthew and others also left the garage, citing creative differences or simply burnout. Staff turnover soared, and fans started noticing changes on the show. The chemistry and soul of the garage had shifted. Outside the shop, Richard was also struggling with his ventures. The Gas Monkey Bar and Grill in Dallas faced management disputes and allegations of financial mismanagement. Lawsuits were quietly filed. Investors lost confidence. Business partners came and went. What once felt like a roaring engine of success was beginning to sputter. By late 2020, Fast and Loud had run its course. After 16 seasons, Discovery Channel ended the show, but not before Richard made the decision himself to walk away. In a shocking interview, Rawlings revealed, "We're done. It's been a hell of a run, but I'm moving on to other things." But the full truth behind his departure was more layered. Viewership had begun to decline. Fans missed the early magic, the spontaneous barn finds, the high-stakes flips, and the raw camaraderie. In later seasons, the show felt more scripted, more commercialized, and less real. The burden of keeping it entertaining, profitable, and innovative had become exhausting. Behind the scenes, Richard clashed with Discovery executives. Creative control became an issue. The network wanted higher drama, bigger builds, and more sensational content. Richard wanted more business autonomy and personal space. After years of compromise, he was simply burned out. And then there was the personal cost: his health, his marriage, and his mental well-being. Richard decided it wasn't worth sacrificing what little peace he had left. Fast and Loud made him famous, but in the end, it nearly destroyed him. Richard had always been a symbol of energy, bouncing between deals, episodes, and interviews with unmatched stamina. But that lifestyle came with a toll. By 2019, fans began noticing a shift.
He looked tired, thinner, older.
The vibrant spark had dimmed. Though never fully public about his medical records, Richard later admitted in interviews that his health had taken a serious hit. Years of stress, lack of sleep, constant travel, and a high-stakes work environment had led to what he called full-on burnout. There were rumors of anxiety attacks, drinking to cope with pressure, and a potential autoimmune disorder, none of which he confirmed. But close friends revealed that he had collapsed from exhaustion on multiple occasions and was urged by doctors to slow down. Richard had always seen himself as invincible, a high-octane machine.
But he was still human.
And his body had finally said, enough. After Fast and Loud ended, Richard retreated for a time. He stopped making public appearances. His social media went quiet. For the first time in decades, Richard Rawlings wasn't chasing the next deal, he was trying to heal. For someone like Richard Rawlings, walking away from the spotlight wasn't an ending, it was a pivot. By early 2021, he returned online with a new mission: reclaim Gas Monkey, rebrand his empire, and do things his way. He launched a new YouTube series called Gas Monkey Builds, producing custom cars without the pressure of a network's agenda. He also started a podcast and leaned into car auctions and limited edition builds, giving fans a more authentic experience. He revived his merch business with fresh branding and began collaborating with independent builders. Though the Gas Monkey bar and grill chain had largely fizzled out, his energy drink and apparel lines survived through online sales.
The response? Mixed.
Some fans were ecstatic to see Richard return on his own terms. Others missed the chemistry of the original show. But one thing was clear: he wasn't giving up. Richard knew he couldn't repeat Fast and Loud. That chapter had closed. But he still had the passion, the vision, and the name. The new Gas Monkey was leaner, quieter, and more personal. No more chasing ratings. No more sacrificing his life for the brand. Now, he was building not just cars, but a new identity. As Fast and Loud faded from screens, Richard Rawlings found himself in the center of legal and financial turbulence that threatened the very foundation of the Gas Monkey empire. Former employees came forward with lawsuits over unpaid wages and wrongful termination. Partners involved in his restaurants and merchandise claimed breach of contract or unfair business practices. In 2019, a major lawsuit hit headlines. The owners of the Gas Monkey Bar and Grill claimed Richard tried to cut them out of profits and dilute their ownership. Rawlings countersued, alleging they damaged his brand. The lawsuits became a PR nightmare. While most were settled privately, the legal fees and negative press took their toll. His once vibrant restaurant chain began shutting down locations one by one. Gas Monkey Live, his massive music venue in Dallas, also quietly shuttered. The financial strain, coupled with public scrutiny, painted a picture of an empire collapsing under its own weight. Richard, however, never directly addressed the controversies in detail, choosing instead to move forward, leaving fans to speculate. In the aftermath of the show and legal battles, Richard Rawlings disappeared from the limelight. No interviews. No social media videos. For the first time in decades, the fast-talking entrepreneur went silent. Behind the scenes, he was regrouping. Friends described this time as his spiritual reset. He focused on his health, changing his diet, reducing alcohol, and getting consistent sleep. The man who once lived life at 120 miles per hour was now learning to slow down. Privately, he reconnected with family. He began repairing relationships that had suffered during his years of celebrity. He even took solo road trips, just him and the road like the early days. This silence was necessary. Richard later admitted he had lost himself in the character he had built for TV. He needed to remember who Richard Rawlings really was, without the lights, the cameras, or the expectations. As of 2025, Richard Rawlings is still very much active, but on his terms. He lives in Texas and runs a scaled-down version of Gas Monkey Garage, focusing on selective, high-end custom builds rather than volume. He's also producing online content, car reviews, build walkthroughs, and the occasional podcast episode. He remarried again quietly in 2022 to Katarina Deason, a woman he credits with helping him find inner balance. Their relationship, unlike past ones, is low-key, grounded, and away from the cameras. Health-wise, Richard is doing better. He maintains a healthier routine, exercises regularly, and keeps his circle small. He still attends auto shows and business events, but no longer says yes to everything. Gas Monkey is no longer an empire, it's a craft.
And Richard?
He's no longer chasing the crown.
He's chasing purpose.
Despite the drama, lawsuits, and burnout, Fast and Loud remains one of the most influential car shows in television history. It inspired millions of viewers to fall in love with restoration, with entrepreneurship, and with the thrill of turning rust into gold. Gas Monkey's legacy is complex. It represents the American dream, but also the warning signs of burning out too fast. For better or worse, Rawlings changed the landscape of automotive entertainment forever. Merchandise is still sold online. Fans still visit the original Dallas garage. And young mechanics still say Richard inspired them. The brand lives on. Simpler, quieter, but still roaring in the hearts of loyal fans. When we strip away the cars, the shows, the fame, and the scandals, what's left is a man, Richard Rawlings.
A hustler from Fort Worth.
A dreamer with grease on his hands. A fighter who made it big, fell hard, and found his way back. He's not perfect. He's made mistakes. But he owns them. And that, perhaps, is his most human trait of all. In many ways, Rawlings' story isn't just about cars or TV. It's about how ambition can build empires, but also how it can blind us from what matters most. Richard Rawlings is still writing his story. And this time, he's in the driver's seat, not racing, just driving. If you enjoyed, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more video about your favorite celebrities and untold stories behind the scenes. Hit the bell icon to stay updated on all new video. Thank you for being part of this ride.